In a neighborhood where tension between law enforcement and residents runs deep, one moment of unchecked prejudice threatens to tear a community apart. Officer Riley Stone's ingrained biases lead to a shocking confrontation with respected Pastor James Wright. Both men's lives change forever. What begins as an act of violence opens the door to an unexpected journey of redemption, forcing everyone involved to confront hard truths about justice, forgiveness, and what it truly means to protect and serve. Before we dive into this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. If the story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to never miss out on more stories like this one. Officer Riley Stone's patrol car crawled through the streets of Oak Grove, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, but already the summer heat pressed down on the aging neighborhood. Through his tinted windows, he watched residents beginning their day, his jaw tightening with each passing face. "Another day in paradise," he muttered, logging his 7th hour on patrol. The dashboard computer chirped with updates about overnight incidents, 2 break-ins, a domestic disturbance, and a handful of noise complaints. Riley's mind automatically catalogued these as further evidence supporting his predetermined conclusions about the predominantly black neighborhood. The radio crackled, dispatching to Unit 274. "Check on a possible disturbance at Marshall and Pine." "Unit 274, copy that," Riley responded, making a sharp turn toward the intersection. As he approached, he spotted a young black man walking briskly, hands in his pockets. Riley's suspicion immediately kicked in. "Hey, you there," he called out, rolling down his window. "Stop right there." The young man froze, slowly turning round. "Yes, officer." "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Riley's tone carried an edge that made the question sound more like an accusation. "I'm just going to work, sir. I'm opening the hardware store today." Riley sized him up, noting the clean polo shirt and name tag ID. "Show me your ID," he demanded. The young man carefully reached for his wallet, movements deliberately slow. "My name's Marcus Thompson. I've worked at Johnson's Hardware for 3 years now." Riley snatched the license, scrutinizing it before tossing it back. "Get moving and keep those hands where I can see them." Marcus nodded, face carefully neutral, as he continued down the street. Riley watched him go, mentally adding another tally to his list of suspicious characters for the day. 2 blocks away, a very different scene was unfolding. Pastor James Wright walked his usual morning route, his presence bringing smiles to faces that had been tense moments before. At 62, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who had seen both the worst and best of humanity and chose to believe in the latter. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," he called out to an elderly woman struggling with several grocery bags. "Those look heavy. May I help?" "Oh, Pastor Wright," Mrs. Henderson's weathered face brightened. "You're too kind, but I couldn't impose." "Nonsense," he said, already taking the heaviest bags. "My grandmother would rise from her grave and box my ears if I walked past a lady in need." His warm laugh drew chuckles from nearby residents as they walked. Mrs. Henderson shared news about her grandchildren, her arthritis, and the neighborhood's latest happenings. Pastor Wright listened attentively, offering gentle advice and words of encouragement. "You know Timothy got accepted into college," she said proudly. "First in our family." "That's wonderful news," Pastor Wright beamed, I always knew that boy had potential. We'll have to recognize him at next Sunday's service." After helping Mrs. Henderson into her house and ensuring she was settled, Pastor Wright continued his walk. He passed the corner store where a group of young men often gathered. Some people avoided this spot, but Wright saw beyond the surface. "Good morning, brothers," he called out to the small group assembled there. Among them Darius, a former student of his youth program, now working 2 jobs to support his younger siblings. "Pastor Wright," Darius straightened up. "We were just talking about the community center project. Is that right?" Wright moved closer, genuinely interested. "What ideas do you have?" The young men gathered around him, their earlier restless energy channeling into animated discussion about basketball courts and after-school programs. None of them noticed Officer Riley's patrol car approaching until it was too late. Riley had been watching the group from a distance, his mind already constructing scenarios of drug deals and gang activity. The sight of Pastor Wright among them only fueled his anger as he pulled up sharply to the curb, lights flashing. "Break it up," he barked, stepping out of his vehicle. "Everyone disperse now." Pastor Wright turned calmly, maintaining his peaceful demeanor. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Riley's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, there's a problem. You're encouraging loitering and potential criminal activity." "Sir, we're having a discussion about community improvement," Wright explained, his voice steady. "These young men are sharing ideas for the new community center." Riley scoffed. "And I'm sure those improvements involve more places for dealing drugs and causing trouble." The young men tensed, but Pastor Wright raised a hand slightly. A silent signal for calm. "Officer Riley, I've known these young men since they were children. They're working hard to make positive changes in their lives and their community." "You're enabling them," Riley shot back, stepping closer, making excuses for their behavior. "This is exactly why this neighborhood stays the way it is." People began emerging from nearby shops, drawn by the confrontation. Phones appeared in hands, recording the scene. "Officer Wright," said Riley firmly but respectfully, "these are good young men who deserve our support, not our suspicion. If you take the time to know them." "Know them?" Riley's voice rose. "I know enough. I see what goes on here every day, and you're supposed to be a man of God. Instead, you're out here encouraging this nonsense." Pastor Wright's voice remained calm. "Officer Riley, there's no need for threats here. We can discuss this like reasonable people." The sound of the slap echoed through the street like a gunshot. Riley's hand had moved faster than anyone could track, connecting with Pastor Wright's face with enough force to snap his head to the side. Gasps and shouts erupted from the crowd, and Wright slowly turned his face back to Riley, a red mark blooming on his cheek. But what struck Riley most was the look in the pastor's eyes, not anger or hatred, but something that looked unsettlingly like pity. The crowd surged forward, voices raised in anger. But Wright raised both hands in a placating gesture. Now, there's no need for a fuss. I'm just trying to give out some free treats to make everyone's day better." Riley stood frozen, his hands still tingling from the impact. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression as he looked at the faces around him. Not criminals or troublemakers, but shocked and horrified community members, all ages, all recording his actions. Without another word, he backed away, nearly stumbling in his haste to reach his patrol car. As he pulled away from the curb, His eyes met Pastor Wright's in the rearview mirror. The calm, steady gaze seemed to follow him, burning into his conscience like a brand. The crowd gathered around Pastor Wright, offering help and expressing outrage. But he remained focused on the departing patrol car. He touched his cheek gently, then turned to address the agitated group. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent street, "what happened here today is not the end of the story. It's the beginning. How we respond in the next few minutes, hours, and days will determine whether this moment becomes another spark for division or an opportunity for real change." As the morning sun climbed higher over Oak Grove, news of the incident began spreading through social media and text messages. The video of the slap would soon go viral, but few who shared it would understand the true significance of that moment. How a single act of violence would set in motion events that would transform not just two men's lives, but an entire community's understanding of justice, redemption, and the power of unwavering grace in the face of hatred. In his patrol car, Riley Stone tried to shake off the memory of Pastor Wright's eyes, but it clung to him like a shadow. He didn't know it yet, but in 8 minutes, he had set in motion a chain of events that would force him to confront not just his actions, but the deep-rooted prejudices that had led him to this breaking point. The real question was, when the truth finally caught up with him, would he be ready to face it? The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric. Dozens of phones captured the moment, their screens reflecting Pastor Wright's red cheek and Officer Riley's retreating figure. Among the onlookers, 23-year-old Malik Johnson pushed through the crowd, his voice rising above the chaos. "Everyone, stay back," Malik called out, reaching Pastor Wright's side, giving him some space. He'd known the pastor since childhood, when Wright's youth programs had kept him off the streets and in school. "Pastor Wright," Malik said softly, supporting the older man's elbow, "let me help you." Mrs. Henderson emerged from her house, clutching a bag of frozen peas. "Bring him to my porch," she insisted, her voice trembling with anger. "I saw everything from my window. We should call the police. The real police." No, Pastor Wright said, allowing Malik to guide him to a nearby bench instead. His voice remained steady, though his cheek had begun to swell. "What we need right now is calm." "Calm?" someone shouted from the crowd. "That cop just assaulted you in broad daylight." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Someone mentioned calling their cousin, who worked at the local news station. Another suggested organizing a protest right then and there. "I understand the frustration," Wright acknowledged. But he recognized the wisdom in his own words. If we respond to hatred with hatred, when does it end? We must transform this moment into movement, this pain into progress. Mrs. Henderson stood up, but Pastor Wright continued, addressing the crowd. Officer Stone's actions were wrong and require accountability, but accountability without transformation perpetuates the cycle. I envision a community where police and residents work together, where trust replaces suspicion, where every person's dignity is recognized and respected. This vision requires courage, the courage to change, to forgive, to grow. To those calling for punitive action, he said, "I hear you. Your anger is valid. But consider this. What serves our community better? Punishment that isolates or accountability that transforms? To law enforcement, we invite you to walk with us, not against us. Let this moment be a catalyst for real change." To Officer Stone, my door remains open. Sometimes the hardest path and the right path are the same path. As the morning sun cast long shadows across Oak Grove, Riley stared at the reflection of his confused face in his squad car's mirror. Outside, people gathering strength from one another, bridging the divide the past had created. Side by side, the pastor and the young activist recognized the challenges, ahead, but felt the glimmer of hope. While the police station was the site of tension and conflict, it had also become a space for dialogue, allowing their voices to merge as they counted on the strength of one another. A community united as they stood bravely for each other's truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the police began their investigation, officers combing through evidence, looking for clues to understand an officer's failure to protect and serve in the most fundamental way. In the days that followed, the community remained divided but not broken. In churches and community centers, police stations and living rooms, people wrestled with questions of justice, forgiveness, and change. Even as the sun set, the light of possibility shone brightly upon Oak Grove. Riley knew the path ahead would not be easy, but with every step toward understanding and healing, he would find a way to protect those around him, including himself. The next morning brought warmth, with the smell of coffee filling the precinct as officers arrived in droves for the day's meetings. Rumors buzzed about the incident, but for Riley, each whispered word still felt like an accusation. "Hey, you good?" Detective Sarah Chun asked, stepping beside him. "Yeah, just thinking," Riley muttered, lost in contemplation. "About the protest?" "Yeah, what do I say to them?" "Just be honest." Her encouragement felt warm but hesitant. "Honesty has gotten me nowhere," Riley muttered under his breath. "That's a start," she said. As the day began unfolding, Riley squared his shoulders, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could turn regret into action, learning from his mistakes and choosing a new path. That evening, Pastor Wright prepared his sermon for Sunday, focusing on the community's healing process. And as he crafted his words, he took comfort in the knowledge that change begins with understanding and forgiveness. Riley Stone, standing on the precipice of transformation, would soon discover the power of redemption that lay in every community's core, where hope and courage intertwined, guiding hearts toward healing and justice.